Hi, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Our mission here at Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live well in spite of your mental health challenge by sharing insights through interviews, practical tools for living well, encouragement, and courage for overcoming all from a Christian perspective. And now, here's your host, Pastor Brad Hafes.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Brad Hafes, your host. Our purpose here in Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live a faith-filled and full life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. Well, today I have somebody who shares my same diagnosis. Her name is Jesslyn McCutcheon, and we came across each other through the Voices of Hope conference that we had online here this last winter or spring. And I am so glad to have you today, Jesslyn.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm looking at Jesslyn's website right now, and I love the fact that at the top of it says Fighting Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, tell me about Fighting Goliath. Tell me about your journey.
My journey started right after I graduated from college. And it started where I was having very difficulty trying to get out of bed. And every day I was experiencing no energy. It was very difficult to, just try to even get ready. And as the days went past, it continued to get worse to the point I ended up not getting out of bed at all. That was the beginning of the depression, which led to my first diagnosis of MDD, major depression disorder, and also OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So I was diagnosed with both of those at the age of 23, and they started treating me for major depression and OCD. And for the next 3 years, they were the longest years of mine and my family's life. It was a living hell, just to put it bluntly. We didn't know what was going on. I had never experienced anything like this before. My family had never really dealt with anything like this before. And during those 3 years, it was nothing but hospitalization stay after hospitalization stay, due to the first hospitalization stay being I attempted suicide. I was in such a deep depression. The first hospitalization stay led to a second. The second led to a third. I was in and out of day treatment programs. I was trying medication after medication to try to find the medication that would work for me. And that is a process in itself. After the medications were not lifting the depression, they decided that they were going to start ECT shock therapy treatments on me to jolt any type of activity to get me back up and going. I had a series of 12 ECT shock therapy treatments done. And after those treatments, they did help to get me up and get me going. But, I had a lot of issues with those treatments as well. I still feel to this day that I have certain memory loss from having those treatments.
Yes.
And this is my opinion. I can't remember certain things from my childhood or high school or college. I can remember things, but I can't remember all things. It's like it never even happened.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that was because of those treatments, but those treatments also did lift the depression to get me back on my feet again. After that,
did at this point, you hadn't been diagnosed with anything other than the major depressive. Is that correct?
That's correct. Those first 2 years, honestly, was nothing but major severe depression where I basically was homebound for those 2 years in the
Mm-hmm.
bed.
You know,
Then,
what's interesting is many times bipolar disorder is misdiagnosed because it shows up as depression, and they don't. I've had a doctor say to me that he believes that if depression is not lifted by medicine, and that doctors need to look at putting somebody on a mood stabilizer to see if that makes the difference. But anyway, I'm getting you off track, but so I'll be interested to see where your journey goes and how you find out what you find out.
well, once they were able to lift that depression some and get me back on my feet a little bit up and going,
Mm-hmm.
I became back involved with life, like took a little part-time job. I sing. I love to sing. I
Oh,
sang with, yeah, my singing and my praise and worship is a whole other conversation, but it is a huge piece of my therapy
sure.
throughout the years. Uh,
Absolutely.
oh, yeah, and especially after what I've been through the last 24 years, it just means that much more. And it took it
Mm-hmm.
to that much of a deeper level for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I praise God for that.
Yeah.
Um, but after I was able to get back up on my feet again, I not only was experiencing depression, but I started to act kind of in an erratic manner sometimes. I would find myself getting really irritated really quickly. I would
Mm-hmm.
make some really rash decisions. I would, at the time I had to move back home from college and stay with my parents because I
Mm-hmm.
was unable to stay by myself in the condition that I was in. And many times I would just want a different scenery. I would just want to get out of the house, and I would take off in my car and I would just drive.
Yep.
And I would keep driving,
Mm.
not really even having a destination. I would drive to where I was in another state.
Oh, yeah.
I
Been there,
just
done
started.
that.
It's like I just wanted to run and just get away from life and just a different scenery, not having to think about anything.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, I mean, the decisions I started to make became very impulsive.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing some really out of character things. For me, one of them, I had very long hair at the time. One day I went in the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and I grabbed a pair of scissors and I cut it all off.
Yeah.
To a very short hairdo. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted my hairdo to look and feel how I felt on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a mess. It was during that time after I did that, I asked my mom if she would meet me. And she ended up meeting me, and she could tell by the look in my eyes. She always told me that there was a look in my eyes when she knew that I was thinking about taking my life or I was in suicidal ideation. I had that look that day. And that day I was hospitalized again for suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
After that hospitalization stay, they started looking at other options with bipolar disorder, and they started treating me with mood stabilizer medicines.
Mm-hmm.
The process continued, and at the age of 26, I was officially diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, and they started treating me according to my diagnosis after I was 26.
Right. And how did you receive that treatment? How did it go?
It has been very rough. My journey with my mental illness since the age of 23.
You cut out there just for a second. So you said your journey with mental health has been what?
My journey with my mental illness has been up and down from the very beginning.
Okay.
Um, it has been really rough. Even trying to find a mood stabilizer that worked for me was a process. I am very sensitive to some of the side effects that the mood stabilizer medicines had.
Yeah.
And I would take myself off the medication once I got back on my feet, thinking I didn't need it anymore, you know?
Right.
And even after I got my diagnosis of bipolar 1, I couldn't come to grips with it. You know, it took me a long time to come to grips with I had a brain-based disorder that I was going to live with for the rest of my life. And once the mood stabilizer medicines would get me back on my feet again, I was good to go. And I was like, I don't need these medicines anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I would take myself off.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I would take myself off without my doctor's consent, which is completely dangerous.
Right. Right.
And from me doing that, that doctor even fired me as a patient because I was not following his treatment plan, you know, that he had specifically for me, which I should have. But that was me in my own mind thinking, hey, I don't need this anymore. You know what I mean? I'm going to be fine on my own.
Sure.
Which the day came where I had to come to grips with, I do live with a serious mental illness. And I have to find within myself how I'm going to best self-love myself and how I'm going to best take care of myself so I can live a fulfilled life.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's taken me 24 years to get to where I am today. And I do live a fulfilled life, but it hasn't been easy.
Right.
You know, it's not a linear process.
No.
No.
It's not. Yeah.
It's your ongoing journey, and every single day, you know, we don't know what the next day is going to bring, but we have the tools and we have the resources. And once we accept it and find out what works best for us, whether it's the medication, whether it's therapy, whether it's, you know, all the stuff you need to do, getting the right amount of sleep, all these things are tied in together to, you know, so you can live a good life.
It's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things that keep us well and healthy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the one thing I struggle with all the time, even now, is my sleep. If I do not get, you know, 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night, it's not good for me. And there are many times I still don't do that. There are many times my brain, even on medication, never shuts off. It's just how it is. The racing thoughts just go, and they will keep me up, you know. And even a couple nights ago, I told my husband, I said, I only slept 3.5 hours last night. So I need to make sure we go to bed really early tonight so I can make up for that sleep. You know, but you know, after a certain amount of time, you know that that's a huge red flag. And you know, if you don't get the sleep that you need, that could cause you to start to spiral, you know?
Absolutely. Yes. You know, I find it interesting because so much of what you're talking about is very relatable for me, having bipolar 1. But then there's other parts of it that are very different. And I think, you know, unfortunately, for instance, bipolar 1 or whatever diagnosis you want to talk about, none of these diagnoses look the same in any 3 people. You know, it because we're all individuals, it shows up differently, or, you know, because of our personality types or whatever. For instance, when they told me I had bipolar type 1, I was relieved to know that the monster had a name and that I was not the monster. You know, that, because I really worried that I was a monster, that there was really something inherently wrong with who I was. And, you know, and so I was relieved Now, you, on the other hand, struggled with the diagnosis, as you said, correct?
I,
Do you know why that was, or?
like you, once I finally did get a diagnosis of bipolar 1, I was relieved too, to know that, hey, now we're going to treat her for this, and we can treat her accordingly
Okay.
to her diagnosis. So am right there with you. I was relieved to know that, I wasn't just this person acting manicky half the time of my life, or in bed half the time of my life, and not understanding what the heck is wrong with me. And all of a sudden, why my world came crashing down. But the struggle for me, it was very real. I mean, I really had a difficult time with finding the correct medication.
Right. It wasn't then, oh gosh, life is perfect and it's really good,
No.
and I've lived happily ever after since then. Yeah.
Oh gosh, no. That was my main struggle. And when we finally, it was when I got married, which was in my early 30s, we finally found a medication that was working really well for me. And
Yeah.
that was one thing I didn't think was ever going to happen for me after I had just gone through basically a decade of my life, facing this war and this storm that came in my life blazing out of nowhere.
Yep. Yeah. I tell people, none of us have chosen to have a mental health issue. None of us have chosen to have a mental illness strike us. And no more than somebody who has cancer, other serious physical illnesses. And I always say this is a physical illness. But I tell them, but it affects my behavior. It affects my thinking. And it's like you're sound asleep at night, went to sleep, had a great day, went to sleep, sleeping soundly, and somebody comes in and shoots you up with methamphetamines. You are not going to act like who you are the next morning.
Right.
No,
and
that's what our own brains do to us periodically without medicine, without treatment.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me too, because I had to accept. I remember the day sitting in my doctor's office, and I asked him, I said, I want to ask you, am I going to have to be on medication for the rest of my life? And he looked at me and he said, Jesslyn, I'm afraid so. He had been treating me for, after that one doctor, for the rest of the period of time. He was my doctor through the ECT treatments and thereon after. That was a hard, quote, pill to swallow.
Yeah. I struggled for 7 years after my diagnosis. Sometimes I think people hear my story and they think I'm saying everything is easy. It wasn't. And I relapsed because I got my medicine goofed up. And it wasn't that I took myself off. I was taking it faithfully. But I wasn't. My problem is all the stinking thinking I had developed over the years had to be dealt with. And then it was like, okay, how am I going to work with this medicine? How am I going to start thinking differently and looking at life differently? So the journey is not, gosh, rosy after that, I'll take this pill and it's all fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And living with a serious mental illness, and there's a percentage of us that have to take medicine on a regular basis, and that is okay. Like you said, this is a chronic illness that needs to be treated just like a physical illness. If you are having to take medication for a period of time, that is okay. And people need to understand it. And then there's, people like myself who does have to take medication for the rest of their lives. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
our serotonin levels, are not where other people's serotonin levels are,
Right, right.
It's to balance those chemicals out.
Well, and
And I,
see, I look at it, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is so engaging. Um, I look at it as I do not have a serious mental illness. I have a mental health disorder. So my brain does
mhm,
not work properly without the treatment. If I stay on top of the treatment, I'm not ill from it. But
mhm.
if I have an episode or something happens and I become unstable, then I'm ill from the disorder. You know what I'm saying? But I get what you're saying. You got to every day. But if I had diabetes type 1, for instance, that would be the case also. If,
Absolutely.
if I had some ongoing physical thing, right now I'm getting old and my Achilles heel on my left foot is acted up and it's just there's not much they can do other than surgery and it might help or it might not.
Mm.
So I got to
Oh
do a whole
gosh.
bunch of things, and then every now and then I get up and I think, oh, I'm going to have to tell my niece we're going to walk now.
Oh yes.
So there's just things that bodily we deal with. And, so for me, it was so important to figure out how can I live well in spite of this?
Absolutely. And I think that is what everyone who faces a mental illness has to face and come to grips with. We all are each uniquely different. Like
Yep.
you said,
Mm-hmm.
no one person is the same and no one person is going to be treated the same. It's
Yep.
it's like what I learned over the years is that you have the armor of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to put on all those pieces every day
Mm-hmm.
because living with what we live with, I cannot be without one of those pieces,
Mm-hmm.
especially the helmet.
Yeah. Yeah.
covering
Exactly.
covering my whole brain.
Exactly. Exactly. And I always say part of my, I've had 23 years of basically no issues at all. And medicine, fortunately, has worked for me. I've had side effects, and, at one point they changed something with how they were making the capsules, and I had the diarrhea for 3 months, until
Oh.
I physically
Mhm.
got used to it. Um,
Mhm.
and there's that balance of living with something for a period of time or wondering if it's always going to be there. But for me, I liken I see bipolar disorder as it is a little monster that I have now chained up in the basement of my house. And
Yes.
he has chains on. I do not feed him. I do not water him. He can't use the bathroom. I don't let him have the lights on. I don't visit him. I don't talk with him. He roars every now and then, but I just say, sorry, buddy. You can't
But
behave. If I let you out, you're not going to behave. So you're just stuck down there, you know? Because when he was ruling my life, I felt like he was going to push himself outside of my body, so to speak.
mhm.
Yeah.
But isn't that I mean, you just described that monster in the basement, but you describing him were is how I felt until I got a grip on it. Like I was,
Yeah.
when are my chains ever going to break? When am I
Right.
ever going to get to the point where I know how to take care of myself to the best of my ability? I'm taking care of myself. I'm listening to my doctors. I'm getting the sleep I need. I'm doing the things. But when are my chains going to break?
Yeah.
You know when they broke?
Win.
They broke when I learned what my mental health armor needed to be. And then I physically every day put on God's armor.
Mm.
in combination with both of those, I had to trust that God was going to see me through this. There's been so many times I've been in the pit so many times, and you peek your head out and you're like, am I going to get out this time? Am I really going to get out? And when you're in the depth of depression, in the depth of despair, it's so hard. It's so hard to seek his presence and to seek his face at times.
Yep.
But that is where I desperately went wrong on so many times. Like during my journey too, some of these times, because I didn't seek his presence, I feel like I had self-inflicted myself in some ways.
Do you
I
think
made it
was
worse.
with your, what I hear you describing is in the depths of depression, it was some of your thinking that was holding you there, or not allowing you to experience God's presence? Can you give me more of a concrete understanding?
Yes, I was in constant spiritual warfare. On this side of me, I had the little snake whispering in my ear, you can't do it. You're not going to do it this time. You're not strong enough to get out.
Really,
you
just
cannot
plain old
do
doubt.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fear,
Yeah.
doubt.
And then, yes, and shame
Mm-hmm.
and guilt.
Sure.
And loneliness, all those things. And when you're in the pit of depression and you're not doing the things you need to, your sleep is all over the place. You're either eating or not eating at all, or eating too much. You're just plainly not taking care of yourself at all.
And believing somehow that when somebody gives you a suggestion or whatever, that that might have worked for you, it's not going to work for me.
Exactly. Like we were talking about, your journey is your unique journey. Nobody's journey is the same and will never be. I constantly wrestled with Satan telling me, the father of lies telling me that this time you're not going to do it.
Yeah. You're not going to get out of the hole.
Right. But then once I was able to seek his presence again.
And tell the listener what that means. I think I know what you mean, but what does that mean?
When I say seek his presence, I mean really seek his face and feel the Holy Spirit within me, that we are connected as one together. And through all these years, the amount of times that this has happened, I am so thankful for my intimate relationship with God. I mean, he has seen me through it all. Even when I couldn't see it, and even when you don't think he's there, and you're like, hello, do you care at all? Do you care at all? But then if you think about it, he died on the cross for all of us. He faced the worst type of infliction possible. He came to feel those same feelings that we all feel, and he does understand. That's why he came in human form.
Yep.
I really had to work on the spiritual side of my relationship, along with everything I need to do for my bipolar and for my mental health toolkit. These two coincide with one another. I cannot do one without the other.
Well, I liken it to this. I would say that the mental health side of things, they can give us hope, they can give us tools, but the hope is sometimes only wishful thinking because it's not a guaranteed thing. But when you infuse all of that with faith, now you've got something that's rock solid.
Heck yes. Amen, brother.
Yeah, and then nobody can tell you otherwise. You might have to endure it longer than you want, but things never stay the same, and God's in charge, and it's going to be okay.
And isn't it so true how God specializes in using people when they are in the depth of that type of pain. Like
Mm-hmm.
the one thing you don't think you're ever going to come out and talk to people about, the one thing that takes the most courage, the most bravery, is the one thing he's going to use.
Oh yeah. The most shameful, horrible thing that I did in a manic episode has become the point of hope for many people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've learned, okay, it really is not about me, is it? Because I can't even say how embarrassed I am about telling this. I just have to tell it because God's going to use it.
That's right.
It's very humbling. But I would say this. I want to give you, and then we probably should wrap up, but I have a feeling you and I'll do another podcast or two. The one thing I would say is that you also have to remember, having bipolar disorder, that you are part of the few chosen, creative, outside the box thinkers there are in this world. And the world is better because of us. There's more color. There's more, when you think about all the artists and all the musicians and all the folks who have suffered through the years, to understand that there is something about creativity and faith that comes through this that we wouldn't have gotten without it.
Absolutely.
We wouldn't have experienced it without it.
My music has been a lifeline for me.
Yep.
Many times the place where I would go is my closet in my bedroom, just to get away from everyone and to close the door. And I would go in there and I would write. Sometimes I would sleep in that closet. Sometimes you have to just clear your mind from everything. And I needed a place. My husband, I've been married for over 14 years, and we have 3 girls. We have 17, one about to turn 14, and one that just turned 12. There's a lot going on all the time.
You got a lot. And there's a lot of mental illness called teenage years there right now, right? Hormonal issues.
Oh, my golly. You hit the nail on the hammer.
Yep. Well, give our listeners a sentence or two of encouragement before we close, would you?
Absolutely. I would just like to say, never, ever, ever give up hope. Know that you are not alone. Know that there is a God that loves you very much. If you don't have the type of support system that you need, there are resources out there to find support groups.
Yep.
NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, is a wonderful organization I have worked with for the past couple of years. I also had the privilege of serving on their helpline, and I grew by doing that. And it's such a privilege now that we were able to cross the line and be on the other side to help somebody with our story. It's just it's the most joyous thing ever. I never thought in a million years that I was going to be able to help somebody else. I never thought in a million years that I'd be, standing up in a church talking about living with bipolar disorder and how churches need to really embrace and wrap their arms around mental illness and talk about it more, to make the conversation more normalized, to erase the stigma that is in church.
And you are also a mental health coach, right? A certified through the AACC?
I am. Yep.
Well, I'm impressed. Tim Clinton is a friend of mine, as well as Matt Stanford. I know those guys. And so, that's a good thing to be, Jesslyn. That's a good thing to be.
It is wonderful. And if I could say, they have, in their bookstore on the AACC, the one thing I have found so beneficial is their Care and Counsel Bible that Tim Clinton and some of his team, did together. Yes. It has
Yep.
been a fabulous resource for me, and it is helping me with my mental health coaching and helping others, and just that whole certification and
Mm-hmm.
becoming a mental health coach. It was awesome.
Yep.
The leaders that taught the sessions, I cried in one of Tim Clinton's session. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just so good. It's just so
Yep. 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 Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I met him at a meeting in Washington, D.C. They brought 9 of us faith leaders together with Samsa and NAMI and others they know that the faith communities have to be involved in mental health care. And if we're ever going to be able to tackle this giant of a crisis that we have, and that was even before the pandemic. And
Yes.
so it's even more so now. And hey, it's been great talking to you. And
Thank you.
you and I probably could talk until the cows come home.
Yes.
So, but and that's with us taking our medicine. Imagine what would happen if I didn't take my medicine. I could really talk.
Yeah.
Well, those of you who are listening, I want you to go to Jesslyn McCutcheon, and I'm going to let her spell that for you. Go ahead.
Okay. The first name is Jesslyn, which is Jesslyn. The last name is McCutcheon, McCutcheon.
And that's .com. This link will be in the show note, should be in the show notes for the podcast. But go there because she's got resources, and at the top of it says Fighting Goliath, and she's got resources and listed all kinds of things. And as far as groups go, you can find a Fresh Hope group online very easily. All you have to do is go to our website. And we have local Fresh Hope group meetings. If there's not one in your area, come to one online. We find that we were doing groups online prior to the pandemic, and they work. It works much the same as just being in person. But Jesslyn told me she's writing a book. And when that book comes out, she and I are going to do a podcast to let you know about the book so that you can get that book. And so, Jesslyn, get her done, okay?
Thank you so much. And that's another thing. You never know what God is going to do in your life and how he's going to use you. I am not a writer. I never thought I'd be writing a book. This is the first book I've ever written, but I know it is my divine calling, and I know that the message needs to be shared so I can help others too.
Absolutely.
And what you said about groups, community is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Having community and being able to share and having people that love you, and that's the main thing. I mean, people just need to be sensitive to the struggles that those who have mental conditions have, and show compassion and just be there for that person and meet them exactly where they are.
And we can find a lot of hope when we see and hear someone tell their story that's gone down the road a little bit farther than we have. AA has understood this for years. And that is, the hope comes from hearing somebody's story and going, okay, God's got this, and he's got me,
Absolutely.
Well, again, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Been a wonderful guest. Listen, for those of you who are listening, thank you so much for being here also today. And I pray that it's been helpful, insightful, and encouraging and healing for you. I'd really like to hear from you. Pastor Brad at freshhope.us, Pastor Brad at freshhope.us. I do read all my emails. I will get back to you sooner or later if your email requires a response. And would you do me a favor if you're listening to this on iTunes? Put a comment down, comment on this episode. It helps other people find it in the algorithms of the Apple stratosphere, if you will. And check out freshhope.us. We have all kinds of groups, and we have hope coaching, and you name it. And there are other organizations and other places to go. And so be sure to look at Jesslyn's website. I can assure you that I suspect you'll see something that's very encouraging there. So be sure to tell your friends about this program. And until the next time, may the Lord hold you with his hope fresh and new daily. I'm Brad Hafes, and this has been another edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health.
You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. If you have an opportunity, please review, share, and subscribe to the Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast on iTunes or on the service that you use. We encourage you to share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. Previous podcasts of Fresh Hope for Mental Health can be found at freshhopeformentalhealth.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and iTunes. Fresh Hope is one of the leading networks of faith-based peer support groups internationally. For more information about Fresh Hope, go to freshhope.us.